Okay, folks, I'm Chad Pinkerton. We're here talking about the Vegas shooting again. Tonight's topics will be the police report that was released, the sealed documents that were released, and related articles. I'm going to pass it over to Joey. Joey, kick us off, prime the pump, and see what we got to say today.
All right. Thank you, Chad. I'm going to be here, and I'm going to be monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, if you have any comments, we can start a discussion here, and we'll try to address it. If you have any personal questions that you'd like to ask, we also do have a website set up. You can go to Las Vegas at chadpinkerton.com. We can also get your questions that way. But Chad, I would like to talk to you a little bit about your thoughts on the evening.
Yeah, so let's just talk about a brief introduction about the police report. First, there's some things that we learned. The perpetrator made at least 5 trips up to his room with numerous suitcases. It was about 15 suitcases that were brought up to his room. Bellman helped him multiple times bring these suitcases up to his room. The reports are between 18 and 26 weapons in his room, all rifles and one pistol, 6,000 rounds into his room. 4,000 to 5,000 unspent, a little over 1,000 were spent rounds. First shots were at 10:05. Engineer that was in the hallway with the security guard first told Mandalay Bay security to call the police at 10:10. We don't know if Mandalay Bay made that call before or after. That's one of the questions we're going to have to figure out. There's been a lot of talk whether the perpetrator was connected to hate groups or terrorist organizations. The fact is that there's no evidence of that. That's been confirmed by the FBI, ATF, and local authorities. In the release documents, one of the key things, there's really 2 things. One was this discrepancy between was there any explosive material in the vehicle. Police report says no. Affidavits say yes, about 100 pounds. I guess we'll get to the bottom of that eventually. And this other idea, these cryptic emails, that goes to persons of interest. They've identified 2 basic persons of interest. 1, the girlfriend. 2, a person that sold him about 700 rounds. Cryptic emails, I've read them. They don't seem terribly cryptic to me. It sounds like buyer and seller having conversation, but you know, the authorities and the investigators would know a lot more about that. So what I'm going to do now is let Joey shoot me some questions, and I'll answer the questions like I usually do.
Thank you. You covered a lot of stuff in your little opening statement right there. I'd like to dive in a little deeper to some of those topics. Specifically, you mentioned some people who are involved with the investigation. Can you tell us what agencies are involved with this?
Sure, you have the local authorities, which will be the local police department in Las Vegas. That's number 1. Number 2 will be the FBI. And number 3, the ATF. You've heard most of it about the FBI and the ATF. And the police department. The ATF is also involved. They're interviewing witnesses, and they are involved, which would be the usual process in a case like this. Joey, what else?
Is the investigation going to affect anyone's case?
Well, the investigation will affect the case because the investigators, who are very good at what they do, will look for and discover evidence. They will itemize the evidence they do find. They will do forensic on the evidence. They will certainly interview hundreds of witnesses and hundreds of other people. And of course, they're going to interview persons of interest. So when they're done with their investigation, and there is no timetable on this, folks, but when they are done, that will be released, and the lawyers will have an opportunity to review that and use that in civil litigation. What's next, Joey?
Chad, you mentioned persons of interest. There is a rumor going around that there were more people involved with this shooting, specifically that there was a second shooter. Do you have any opinion on that?
Okay, well, of course, in a case like this where so many people were injured, harmed, or killed, that there's going to be a lot of rumors, and the rumor mill gets started. They have identified in court pleadings that have been released these 2 other persons of interest. Now, The local authorities have made clear that they're not suspects. A person of interest is not particularly a suspect. What they are is somebody that the authorities want to talk to and interview. That's just part of the process. The idea that there was a second shooter, every agency has come out and said there is no evidence of a second shooter. If they come up with a second shooter later, we'll find out, and we'll find out pretty quickly. But I personally have reviewed over 200 videos of the incident, and not one of them shows a second shooter. I highly doubt there's going to be a second shooter. The police department has been very clear that this was a sole shooter that did this dastardly act. So I doubt there's going to be this second shooter, Joey.
You mentioned that you've seen videos and watched plenty of hours of videos on this. There is reports also of some missing video from Mandalay Bay. Have you heard this rumor as well?
We heard that earlier on. This is talking about Mandalay Bay security video. And there were reports and identified reports that there was missing video. The lawyers, we won't know for a while if there is this missing video. One thing we'll do is in discovery, we'll find out if there is any missing video. The agencies will certainly find out. They're not going to release that type of information right now, and it wasn't in the police report. But if there is missing video, it's very questionable, right? If you go play blackjack at the Mandalay Bay, I guarantee you there are 7 to 10 cameras on you at all time. And those cameras never fail. There's money on the table, and they don't want any mistakes, right? They're watching the dealers, they're watching the gamblers, they're watching the patrons around the tables. They're not going to make the mistake of not having that video. It would be surprising if they were missing some video that would be important to this case. They said, and the rumor has been, that they had a glitch or an error. That would seem quite convenient. But we'll find out. What else, Joey?
I'm going to kick it over to the chat right now. I am monitoring the comments. So if you would like to start a discussion in the comments, if you have a question that you'd like to ask, I'll make sure I try to get to it. Right now I want to talk about Andrea's question. She wants to know that, did you need to file a police report with the Las Vegas Police Department to be involved with this litigation? Is this going to harm you if you did or did not?
Okay, so Andrea, thanks for the question. The question is, did I have to go to the authorities and file a report? Of course not. You didn't. First of all, there's already an investigation started, and that's all the police department needs to initiate an investigation. In this case, they initiated it on their own. There were hundreds of people, thousands of people affected. 58 people are dead. Over 500 people injured and shot. At least 200 to 700 people injured in the trampoline. So this is a case that the police department will open on their own. You didn't have to file a police report. It won't affect your case whatsoever. That's not the type of notice that you have to have in a civil claim. When you have a civil claim, we'll file a complaint and a master complaint and allege your claims in that complaint. Totally different than in the criminal sector. What else, Joey?
Thank you. I've got another question here in the chat from Paige. And she wants to know, with all this information that has been released so far, why can't they release any video?
Well, you got to understand, Paige, that the investigation is ongoing. So while it's ongoing, the police department and the federal investigators have the right to keep that close to the vest. They have the right to continue that investigation until it's complete. The materials that have been released, the court determined that were okay to release before the investigation was completed because the media has asked for that information. So the media has a right to some of that information, but the court has the same right to protect the investigation. So that's going to be a slow process. I highly doubt video will be released anytime soon during this investigation. That's certainly things that the investigators are combing over very, very carefully, just like my law firm. We get videos and we're combing over them and analyzing them and having experts look at them so we can make our own determination. I want to make this clear. Just because the FBI and the ATF and the local authorities are having an investigation, that's not the only folks that are doing an investigation. The plaintiffs in this case, the lawyers in this case, we started our investigation a long time ago, and ours does not start or begin with the local authorities or the federal authorities. We're going to do our own investigation. Can we help each other? Sure. Are we helping each other right now? I don't think there's any communication between the lawyers and the authorities, but sometime down the road, everybody will want to know what everybody found. So the investigation will be ongoing. Our investigation as the lawyers, it's just started.
All right, thank you. Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the question in the chat. If there's any more people that would like to ask something, feel free to comment. I do want to bring it back to some of the allegations and rumors of the night. There's a rumor that the suspect brought 15 to 20 pieces of luggage with him. Is that true at all?
Well, let me answer the luggage. The luggage is important because how did this perpetrator get all of these weapons, 18 to 26 weapons, into his room? Well, he had to go through the front door. He had to talk to the bellman and check in. He had to use some elevator, either the freight elevator or the service elevator or the main elevators for guests. And these bags were heavy because he had 18 to 26 weapons. He had 6,000 rounds, so he had to get it up to his room. And how did he do that? Through these bags. The first day he brought 7 bags up to the room, 6 of which were carried by the bellman. Sounds like to me that those probably were pretty heavy with the weapons and the ammunition. The days after that, he brought 2 to 4 bags each day, for up to 15 total bags. He had a very short stay. Why would a man need 15 bags? How heavy were these bags? Who touched these bags? Did it alert anybody for a man to bring this many bags right through the front door? Did anybody think about, why are these bags so heavy? Those are questions that we need to answer, because those are chances and opportunity the defendants in this case, in Mandalay Bay and MGM, had a chance to stop it beforehand. That's what we're supposed to do in security. We're supposed to predict the worst and protect the patrons. That's what we're supposed to do. That didn't happen in this case, and these bags are very important to that concept. What else, Joey?
All right, thank you. Also in the chat, we do have some more conversation happening. If you'd like to join in, feel free to drop in your comments and your questions, and we will try to get to them. I want to talk about the bags a little bit more. You say that a bellman might have helped him bring the bags up to his room. They're 15 to 20. They're going to be heavy. Are you going to assign specific blame to some employees, or is this just going to be directed at Mandalay Bay itself?
Well, okay, so a company like Mandalay Bay and MGM has an obligation to train its employees. And an employee can only do what he's trained to do, okay? So these bellmen, they're supposed to be trained to take the bags up to the room. One of the things they should be trained to do is look for suspicious behavior or suspicious bags. We need to know what Mandalay Bay did to train its employees. Are we going to blame the bellman or name them in the lawsuit? Most likely not, because it's on the company and the company's responsibility to properly train these folks. It's not their job to set up policies and procedures and training seminars. That's the company. They needed to be trained. We know 15 bags went up. We know 18 to 26 weapons went up. We know 6,000 rounds approximately went up. Where was the red flag? And should they have been trained? And should they have been trained better to see this and make some determination to either call someone for help or go to his room and do a welfare check or investigate his room? That's a lot of time. We had 5-6 days before this event that something could have been done to discover this guy was going to do something like this. He had his do not disturb on for 48 plus hours. Nobody did a welfare check. So that's a problem. Training is an issue. That's a duty in the law. You have to train your employees effectively. What else?
Chad, you spoke a lot about a welfare check there. I'm not too familiar with it myself. Could you elaborate on what a welfare check is?
So a welfare check is this. Look, people go to Vegas, they have a good time, they drink, they do other things, and they go to their room. If somebody has a do not disturb on their room for a certain period of time that seems extended, the employees of the hotel should go in the room just to do a welfare check. Hey, check on the person, make sure they're okay, they're not sick, they're not dead, they're not hurt, they hadn't been robbed. Check the room, make sure everything's okay. That's called a welfare check. Now, Steve Wynn, a long time ago, years ago, instigated a policy every 12 hours we need to check the room. He came on the record and said that. When he did that, and when he escalated his security in his hotel, the Wynn Hotel, MGM, Mandalay Bay, they laughed at him. They laughed at him. He was the laughingstock. But who's the laughingstock now? Because if they would have checked that room, they had 48 hours. That was 4 chances to do a welfare check before this went off, and they didn't do it. They should have done it. What else, Joey?
There's been some talk about an L bracket. Can you elaborate as to what that is?
Okay. The L bracket is seen in the police report and some of the affidavits that were released. It was simply a small bracket that was placed on one of the doors, an exit door, for if there was a fire or something like that, the patrons had to be able to get out and get out of the building without using the elevators. It was screwed in and it locked that door. Here's a big question. When did the perpetrator put this L bracket on the door? We don't know. One easy way to know, like they're supervising the games and the money on the floor with 7 to 10 cameras on each of the plane where the cards are being dealt and the money is being exchanged. What if they would have just put a hallway monitor to check that hall? They would have known when this perpetrator went out and put that L bracket on. They could have known before it happened. They could have sent somebody up and said, you know what, why is this here? Do we need to check all the rooms? Is there something going on? That could have been a red flag. We don't even know when it happened at this point or when he put it on because there wasn't a camera to tell us that. That's the problem. They need to think in advance. They need to make sure that if they can recognize a problem like locking a fire escape, which is against the code because people can be harmed and it needs to be immediately opened, and they didn't even know that. When did they know that? They should have known it long before this shooting. What's next, Joey?
I'm going to have a question from the chat here. Regina would like to know, do you know when the windows were infiltrated and if the breaking of the windows was the true reason for the security check?
Okay, so I'm going to guess, Regina, that you're talking about the windows outside that he shot from. The first shot, which were about 10:05, there were 2 bullets shot through the window, we believe, at that time. So that would have been the first shots. Those could have been shots just to break the windows. Then there were the other shots that followed that were towards the patrons down below. We don't know exactly how long it was until the shots rang out because we had this time between where he shot down the hallway and then he went back to shoot the patrons. So the first 2 shots went through the glass, and that was most likely to break the windows. However, what it seems like to me in the police report is what alerted the authorities to the problem was originally this L bracket. That's why Mr. Campos went up, and then he was shot at when he was in the hall, and then he calls down and says there's shooting on the floor, and then a few minutes later the engineer says, hey, we need to call the police. That's kind of the timeline that we have right now. What else, Joey?
Thank you. I'm going to move over to the chat again. Paige wants to know, have you seen or is there any rumor that Stephen Paddock is in any of these videos?
I haven't seen any video with Stephen Paddock in it. I have not seen any video. And of course, there's video up towards the Mandalay Bay where the shooting was coming, but there is no video that I've seen of Stephen Paddock. Now, there's certainly video of him going into the hotel, going to the service elevators, taking these bags up. That's where this information in the police report really came from. They scoured through some of this video to determine where he was and what he was doing. They went back to his previous visit at another hotel and scoured that video to determine what he was doing at that hotel. So what the investigators did, and it's important that they do this, they tried to track back as far as possible, determine what Mr. Paddock, the perpetrator in this case, was doing beforehand. And they've gotten a great deal of information about that. Okay, Joey, next question.
Thank you. And I thank everyone who is asking questions in the chat. Feel free to comment. Let's start a discussion about this. We also do cover a lot more subjects. If you want to see more things we cover, you can always go to MandalayBayVictims.com, and there's a lot of videos that will cover other subjects as well. I do want to know, in the investigation, has anything been released about things that were found after the fact in the hotel room?
Yeah, I mean, the police report is very thorough. You can get it online. The police report has a lot of information and pictures about what was found. A vase, a comb, a hammer, cameras, a computer, all these weapons, all these things are listed, and they're actually itemized because that's what the investigators do. They itemize and ticket, meaning number, each thing that they found in the room. I can guarantee you the investigators did a great job of itemizing everything that they found in that room. And if you go to the police report, everything's itemized. You can look through it. I've certainly looked through it. There's a discrepancy there on the number of weapons. The police report can be 18 or so, and then the other items that we found out later from the released documents, it can be as high as 26. We'll figure that out. Just probably a counting error or just making a mistake of what we're telling the people. We'll figure that out. Okay, Julie?
All right, thank you. I believe that's all the time we have for right now. If I didn't get to your questions, or if you still do have questions, you can email losvegas@chadpinkerton.com. And you can ask your questions there and get an answer to it. Chad, do you have any other information you'd like to give us?
Yeah, I'm just happy everybody that joined in. You know, one of the things we try to do in these presentations is keep this relevant. Keep the 58 relevant, because when we stop talking about this, it becomes irrelevant to the public. That's a problem, because the public needs to be engaged so that we can make sure there's change in the future. That's part of this lawsuit. But let's don't forget these 58. They're important people that lost their lives, and we're not going to let that be in vain. Okay, something's got to change, but they lost their lives, but we're going to change it. We're going to make a difference. Thanks for coming out. Thanks for all my folks helping me in the video. Look forward to seeing you next week. We'll do a promo for next week.